Hi, everyone. Today I want to talk to you about something I and many of you are probably guilty of being extremely petty. Kanye West interrupting Taylor at the 2009 Music Awards? Petty. Prince Charles is a fair partner wearing the same dress as Princess Diana? Hilarious. Embarrassing, but also petty. Tipping a waitress 1 penny? Something I have seen a real life person do, and also extremely petty. All great examples of being petty, but all pale in comparison to the levels of petty we will be discussing today. Because today, I want to tell you all about a phenomenon called spite houses. Spite houses happen when someone has enough money to build an entire house just to spite the people around them. Hence the name, spite houses. So, today we are going to talk about my 10 favorite spite houses and their reasons for existing. First, in 1716, a guy by the name of Thomas Wood built a house in Massachusetts that would eventually become known as the Old Spite House. There are actually two different stories for this one. The first is that two brothers occupied this house, but lived in different sections. The brothers couldn't stand each other, but both refused to sell their half of the house. And as a result, the brothers lived in the house together without ever speaking a word to each other. Later on in the house's history, it was eventually passed through inheritance to another set of brothers. The older brother got the majority of the inheritance, along with a better house not far from the old Spite House. The younger brother, on the other hand, got nearly nothing except that old Spite House. So, in an act of very petty revenge, the younger brother added a 10-foot extension to the top of the house that just barely blocks the view of the ocean that his brother had. As far as I could tell through researching, the old Spite House in Massachusetts is still standing and actually occupied by someone. And as a testament to the current housing market situation in the United States, most of these houses, built purely out of spite, are still standing and occupied by real life people. Another example of using your house to spoil someone's view is the Salem Spite House, which, as far as I could tell, was not made by witches. The building was specifically built to block the view of neighbors around it. However, after the owner died, his heirs agreed to tear it down in 1898 so as to avoid a lawsuit with obnoxious neighbors, which I think is really funny. Like, even this guy's sons thought his neighbors blew chunks, but they decided it wasn't worth the money to keep pissing them off. From spiting your neighbors to spiting a city. Our next example comes from Alameda, California, where in the early 1900s, the city of Alameda used its power of eminent domain to take a large portion of land from a man named Charles Frawley to build a road. For those of you who don't know what eminent domain is, it's basically a power that the government has where they can take your land for public use. And public use is a pretty broad term, and also they do have to pay you, but it's, quote, equal compensation to your land, which could really mean anything. Like, you could have sold that house for maybe $400,000, but on the open market it's only roughly estimated to be worth 200, and they can pay you the 200,000. As you can imagine, Charles was not very happy about this. Charles was planning on building his home on this plot of land, and much like the indomitable human spirit, he did not let California drag him down. Charles would go on to build a house along the street that was 10 feet wide, 54 feet long, and 20 feet high on a plot of land that was left to him. He then went on to build a second story to his house in such a way that it hangs over the street while not encroaching on the city's zoning, which is pretty baller. If you look closely enough, you can also notice that the building almost completely blocks the side of another building. This is said to have been done on purpose by Charles, so that he could block the view of a neighbor who was unsympathetic to his battle against the city of Alameda. Now we move on from spiting a city to spiting God himself. In 1904, a man named Joseph Edelston died in Gainsford, England. His family asked the church that he had been a part of for 41 years if they would erect a monument in his honor for his years of service to the church. The church refused as their churchyard was full, but they said if their family donated their land, which was right next door, to the church, then they would have room to make him a monument. Joseph's family felt extremely slighted by this, and instead of donating their land to the church, they built a house on the property so the church wouldn't be able to expand. They then built a 40-foot pillar on the property that towered over the church, which has become, to my knowledge, only one of two examples of using buildings as a dick measuring contest. The other example, of course, being that time that North Korea built an entire village to show off to South Koreans how powerful they were, despite no one actually living in the village. Next is a house from the 1800s. In Alexandria, Virginia, there was an alleyway between two neighboring houses. This alleyway was used by all manner of carriages, peasants, and general vagabonds that use alleyways. The owner of this house, John Hollinsbury, got so fed up with the loud horse carriages and smell of human urine that he built an entire house in the alleyway so as to block it off from pedestrians. Now, you can either call him cheap or a genius, but John used the exterior walls of the two houses surrounding the alley as walls to the house. He added a floor, a roof, and bam, no more alleyway. Inside the house, you can actually see gouges in the walls where old carriages had scraped up against the house. Not only is Hollinsbury's Spite House still standing, but it's actually occupied, which must be a pretty sweet deal. If your walls need to be repaired, all you have to do is wait for your neighbors to repair theirs, and boom, free wall. This next Spite House is possibly the gayest house in America, and I do say that with all respect. This house, found in Topeka, Kansas, is known as the Equality House. The reason for this house's color is because it is directly across the street from notorious Westboro Baptist Church, a group that we will say is not fond of the LGBTQ community. So, in order to piss them off, the humanitarian charity Planting Peace purchased a home across the street from the church and then painted it the colors of the LGBTQ flag. The Equality House has hosted several events which I'm sure must drive the church absolutely mad. These events include a gay wedding, an organized drag show, and a mock wedding between wizards Gandalf and Dumbledore. There was also a fundraising event in which a 5-year-old girl was selling lemonade in order to help raise money for love and peace. This event, in particular, really bothered the church, as members called the police on this little girl to have it shut down. The same charity actually bought another house a few years later, right next to the Equality House, and painted it the colors of the transgender flag in another attempt to piss off the Westboro Baptist Church. But by all accounts, they're actually pretty neighborly with each other. This next Spite House showcases the importance of lawyers and loopholes while engaging in petty behavior. In 1922, in Newbury, Massachusetts, as per a divorce settlement, a man was required to build an exact replica of his house for his former wife. However, the man noticed that his ex-wife failed to specify where this had to be built. And so, in an example of extreme pettiness, the man built a replica of his house on the marsh at the edge of town, resulting in salt water infiltrating the pipes of this new home. For those of you who don't know how big of a deal this is, salt water will slowly degrade your pipes and can potentially lead to both salt and heavy metals to contaminate your water, which will eventually poison you. So, safe to say the house was abandoned shortly after it was built. This next house is actually an example of using pettiness for the greater good. In 2012, after years of blocking an attempt to build a movie studio on a lot he owned in Marion County, California, George Lucas, of all people, gave up on building this studio. But before he left, he enacted one of the greatest acts of pettiness. You see, Marion County was an extremely wealthy area of California, snobs and the like. And so to piss them off, and as revenge for blocking his movie studio, Lucas decided to build a low-income housing project on the plot he owned, both pissing off the wealthy people in the area and doing some good along the way. This next Spite House I want to talk about is second only to our final entry in terms of dedication to the pettiness. In the 1950s, in Virginia City, Nevada, two neighbors did not like each other, getting into a bunch of arguments and stuff like that. Eventually, one of them moved out and built a new house to get away. Unfortunately for him, he underestimated the lengths to which some people will go to piss off someone else. In what can only be described as the adult equivalent to putting your finger in your sibling's face and repeating, "I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you," his former neighbor bought the plot next to his new house and built his house just 12 inches away from the new home, intentionally blocking sunlight, a view, and a breeze to both houses just to piss off his former neighbor. And here we go, everyone, our final entry, the most fuck you spite house in history. Except I'm kind of cheating because this is not a spite house, but a spite city. In the year 541, the Sassan Empire conquered a place called Antioch. The emperor of the Sassan Empire, a guy named Korasu, then commissioned a new city be built that was an exact replica of Antioch. Kosaru then forced the 30,000 citizens he captured to move to this new city and live in their old houses and work their old jobs. He named his city this, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but roughly it translates to better than Antioch Kurosu built this, which I think is just the funniest fucking thing ever. Imagine you spent your entire life at Antioch, then some guy conquers you, forces you to move, except when you get to this new place across the desert, it feels like you've entered the Twilight Zone because you see your old city on the horizon. Now everything is the same, but whenever someone asks you where you're from, you have to tell them Antioch, but the one that Kurosu built. Anyway, that's it everyone. Thank you for watching, and if you made it this far, go ahead and leave a comment. And if you liked it, please give me a subscribe. Or, don't. I'm not your dad. Bye.